Hi, and welcome to the show today. I am so excited to interview the amazing Tiffany Barnes. Her story is powerful for women entrepreneurs out there who might be currently struggling in a situation. Tiffany has gone through the highs and the lows and is now speaking to real estate investors, and I'll let Tiffany speak on that a little bit more.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. So just walk us through a little bit of what Tiffany is doing at the moment, and then we'll go into the nitty-gritty, if you get what I mean.
Sure. Well, I've got two things that I'm really focusing on right now. The first one is I have a nonprofit that I started back in high school. So we're talking 20 years ago, that I started as a support group. It's now a 501c3, and it helps people who've been through abuse, men, women, children. I have a podcast that I also work with people on, that where I interview people who have gone through traumatic experiences, not focusing on the trauma, but focusing on overcoming. And then my bread and butter to make my money is I do real estate investing, specifically right now focusing on short-term vacation rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, and things like that.
That's amazing. I love your story because it's so, it kind of hits a point for me, because we've all gone through experiences when we were children, but these low experiences can really shape us for the future going forward. But sometimes we just need a helping hand. And so your charity has come from a place that's not so pretty, and you've really created something of a positive experience for kids, and you can help them now. So just walk us through a little bit more about what your charity can do for people.
So one of the biggest things we do, when we started this last year, we have a youth empowerment day. And I think it's really important right now to empower youth, because there's so much bullying going on in schools, and just going through abuse in general can really take a toll on a person. And I know that firsthand. I used to be suicidal and anorexic as a kid as a result of the abuse. And so one thing that we're really trying to do and implement is this Youth Empowerment Day. We do it every year here in Salt Lake City, and it's just a place where people can come together, play games, have musical experiences, all different age ranges, and just kind of feel that they're not alone in their circumstance. And not only that, we also do a lot of motivational speaking, not just myself, but other guest speakers as well. And just helping kids realize the main thing is that they're not alone, and it is okay to say something. And when they do say something, they're going to be protected.
I love that. It's such a deep, dark story, and it needs to be told, abuse with children and so forth. But I love that you've put a positive spin on things, because there's so many charities out there, or so many people out there wanting to do good, but they keep on talking about, let's say, anti-bullying, for example, and they keep on talking about that. But the thing is, to make a movement for the positive, you really have to do something that's going to change the mentality, not keep on focusing on the negative, which is the bullying. So in my opinion, that's what you're doing with abuse. You're creating these events, and you're creating a positive experience for these kids to just kind of grow and build self-confidence. So I thank you so much for doing what you're doing. That's amazing. So Tiffany, it hasn't always been pretty in the world of Tiffany, right? Like, I've got my things growing up, and you do as well. So can you walk us through a little bit of what it was like for Tiffany growing up and your experience?
Sure. So for the first 13 years of my life, I had suffered all forms of abuse: physical, sexual, emotional, you name it. And there came a point where my stepfather was sexually abusing me, and basically had threatened, if you say anything to anybody, I'll kill you. Well, when you go through something like that, and you have a trusted adult saying, hey, you say anything, I'll kill you, and he had a very violent temper and behavior, I believed him. And so I would keep my mouth shut. And my mom's a drug addict. She's been a drug addict my entire life. And so I didn't feel that I could necessarily go to her and confide in her anyways to say something was happening. Well, she came to me, and I was getting ready for school one day, and had inquired about the relationship between myself and my stepfather. And it was shocking, because she'd never taken any stock in my life, like literally never took any stock in what I was doing or how I was doing. And so I had like a little glimmer of hope, if you will, that maybe if I say something to her, she will protect me. And so I divulged what had been taking place. And long story short, we had a family meeting, and he gave my mom an ultimatum. He says that I was lying, and said, "You've got to choose. It's your daughter or me." And my mom basically turned to me and said, "You have until tomorrow to get the bleep out of my house," and had a yard sale, sold my stuff right in front of me. You know, I was worth more to her as a dime, a quarter, or a penny for a material object than I was as her own flesh and blood daughter. And I'm the oldest child. So, you know, it
Wow.
was just really tough. And so you can imagine, I'm 13 years old. I'd gone to this trusted adult, my mother. She basically said, "I don't believe you," and chose her husband over me. I just grabbed a garbage bag full of clothes and walked past her little yard sale and jumped on the bus. I had a couple of bucks I had saved up and jumped on the bus and took it into downtown Salt Lake City, thinking I'm pretty much homeless. And the reason I felt that way is I come from a very dysfunctional family. Now I know there's a lot of dysfunction in families today. I'm no different than anyone else. Unfortunately, I do come from a family of abusers, drug abusers, physical abuse, things like that. And there wasn't a lot of stability for me to just, you know, go stay with somebody. I didn't feel at that time.
Mhm.
So the one person I felt I could go to was my biological father. And so that's where I rode the bus to. Now, as I'm sitting on this bus, I'm really worried that I'm exchanging one abuse for another. And the reason I say that is my biological father physically abused me up until my parents' divorce. So I really, like I said, I didn't have a lot of choices. I went there, told him why I was there, and he takes me in. And as he takes me in, he takes on a second job, and I become a latchkey kid. And if you're not familiar with what a latchkey kid is, I basically would wake up, my dad would be gone for the first job. I'd come home from school and he'd still be gone. I'd be home usually till about 6 o'clock at night by myself. And going through such a traumatic thing at that age and having that much time alone was not good. It wouldn't be good for anyone. And so that's where I started to go into the deep, dark, you know, the anorexia and the, if my mom doesn't want me, why should I even be here on this planet? You know, she's the one that gave me life. And I just literally wanted to end my life. I didn't want to be here anymore.
Wow,
And
Tiffany.
go ahead.
Wow, that is just amazing, like mind blowing to me. So you're 13, you had one type of abuse, and then you went to basically no love and you're fending for yourself. What were the thoughts inside your head right now? I know that you were self-harming yourself. What were the thoughts going through your head? Did you ever have any sort of there must be something more, there must be a reason why I'm here sort of thoughts? Like, just walk us through what the inner thoughts were.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the next step, I guess you could say, is I woke up one morning and I said to myself, today's going to be the day. Today's going to be the day I end my life. And then
Wow.
I had this other voice in my head that says, if you do that, and this is probably the worst way to say it, is who really wins? And I realized that I was letting this defeat me. And it was almost like that Jiminy Cricket, right, on your shoulder, or that inner voice that said, don't give up, and that it was time to seek help. So I picked up the phone, I called a friend of mine, told her the state I was in and kind of like, you know, mental state I was in and what I was about to do. And, you know, it took a lot for me to pick up that phone and say, hey, I need help, because I've always been a self-sufficient person, you know, growing up. I had to be. And I had to go through 2 years of counseling. I worked with a social worker, and that's when I went down the path of emancipation. And at the time, when my social worker told me about it, there was only one other case in the state of Utah for somebody at 15 years old to become a legally emancipated minor. So I did have the odds stacked against me, but I thought, what's the worst they can say? No.
Mm.
So I went and basically stated my case before a judge, and I became the second case in the state of Utah to become a legally emancipated minor at 15 years old.
Wow. That's incredible. Okay, so what happened then? I'm just like, your story is just it's I'm feeling goosebumps and I'm feeling my stomach hurt for you. Yeah, so walk us through what happened after you got emancipated. You seeked help. Walk us through that.
So once I became emancipated, I was literally my own legal guardian. I could check myself in and out of school. I didn't have parents saying, hey, get up, go to school, don't do drugs, don't do this, don't do that. You know, I was pretty much free reign. And I did make myself a promise And it's a promise that I've never broken to this day, 22 years later. And that promise was that I was going to live the rest of my life to be everything that my parents were not. My parents were high
Wow.
school dropouts, teenagers pregnant, my mom hooked on drugs. I was like, I'm going to be the opposite of all of that, because I saw what the result was of, them being that way.
Yeah.
So I excelled at school. I got up, I went to school, graduated top of my class, ended up getting a full ride scholarship to college, carried 3 part-time jobs my senior year. I paid rent. I was doing the adult thing and still, carrying straight A's and all that. And it wasn't necessarily despite my parents, but for me, like I went to my own parent-teacher conference. There was a write-up in the newspaper about me, and the teacher that was interviewed was like, it wasn't that weird that she came to her own parent-teacher conference, but for me, I legitimately wanted to know how I was doing. And I loved the adult praise that I got. That's why I was such a studious person, I think, because I
Yeah.
didn't get praise growing up. And so it felt really good to get the praise from the teachers and the faculty, to get those awards and to excel and be recognized. And
Hmm.
so I think that's kind of what fed my flame, if you will.
Yeah.
But obviously I was that girl with the special circumstance in school.
Yeah.
And so kids would come up to me and say, well, that's not fair. You get to write your own, tardy notes or excuse notes. And they'd say, why don't you have parents at home? And I would share with them why. I was emancipated. Some people knew what it meant. Some people didn't. But when I started to share why, it was incredible how many of my peers were coming out of the woodwork saying, I too am being abused at home, or by a neighbor, or by a relative, or whatever. And that's when that light bulb, that aha moment happened for me. And I realized, this is why I didn't take my life. Because I was meant to be a catalyst for others to realize this doesn't have to define you. This
I
can be a stepping stone, not a crutch.
Tiffany, you just said it. Through your life and through your low moments, you were then able to, I guess, be cracked the shell that you had from all the abuse and things, and completely open up your heart and get the messages from above to realize your true core purpose and be a shining light for others. That just gave me goosebumps, and thank you so much for sharing that. So now at such a young age and carrying all the burdens, and I'm guessing you did heal yourself through whatever mediums. Now you're able to help others through your charity. So if anyone's listening and they're going through a similar thing that what you went through, what would you say to that person?
I would say to never give up. Resilience is key. Everything is but a moment in time. I used to always say this too shall pass. And one thing that really kind of got me to where I am today is I always prepared for the worst, but hoped for the best. And I don't mean that in a negative connotation. It was more, I was always 3 steps ahead of myself, if you will,
Yeah.
financially, spiritually, emotionally. And sure, I still have my days. Believe me, I'm still human. I still have things that I'm working on through different modalities. But, it's just something that you've got to realize, that take one day at a time and, be resilient. We all come to this earth for a purpose. And I just know my purpose is to help others realize that, again, abuse doesn't have to define you. And the statistics of abuse are so staggering that in my lifetime, I will never reverse all of it, but I'm going to make an impact in the world for it.
Just by sharing your story, you've already made an impact. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I want to hug you right now, but I know we can't. But I am air hugging you right now. So Tiffany, if someone really wants to reach out to you and get a hold of you and ask you questions on your charity or your real estate investor work, how do we do that?
Well, I think first and foremost, I would love for any of your viewers to help me to share the movement to stop abuse. SHARE is the name of my charity. It stands for Sharing Hope for the Abused Through Resilience and Empowerment. So if they're interested in that, they can go to sharethemovement.org and find all about what we are about and any events we have coming up. I also have a podcast that I do called Speak Loud Podcast. You can find that at speakloudpodcast.com. maybe one of your viewers might want to be somebody that I interview. I'm always looking for people to interview. And you can also find me on social media as well.
Amazing. So random question before we close out. What has been a life-changing book that you read that you share with a lot of people because it just meant so much to you?
Besides The Giving Tree, which is one of my favorite children's books, I would have to say How to Win Friends and Influence People. This world is such a people place, right? Whether you're in real estate or you do podcasts or you work at the Walmart, doesn't matter. You have to learn how to work with people. And we're all human, we're all going through experiences. And one thing I didn't mention to you is I recently, this last year, got involved with a movement called the Kindness Revolution. And I'm all about spreading kindness. You never know what people are going through, and we do a lot of events for that as well in conjunction with my charity. So that's why I really like that book by Dale Carnegie. It's kind of a classic. It's been around for a little bit of time, but I try to read it at least once every year to refresh some really good points in there.
That's amazing. We definitely met for a reason. I'm all about kindness and appreciating people. So you are a shining light. Thank you for sharing your story and being who you are, because you are special. You really are. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing in the world. So that's Tiffany Barnes, everyone. Thank you so much. Do reach out to her. She is an amazing inspiration to women entrepreneur out there, going from a low moment and really creating something that's making a difference in the world. So thank you so much. And I'll see you on the next show.
Thank you.